So uh, so we are going for the second type of technology for the energy storage, that is called as a flywheel. Let's start. Yeah. So, it is a slightly different type of concept than the batteries which we have learned. So, this stores mechanical energy, that is, it stores kinetic energy. So, the flywheel stores kinetic energy into a rotating inertia. We know what is inertia, right? Inertia is a state of being continuously in one, what do you say, state, whether it is a movement state or inertia of motion or inertia of rest. We know that, right? So basically the object continues to be in rest if until unless we have given an external disturbance, right? That is moment of inertia of that is inertia of normal thing, right? That is inertia basically. And again we have inertia of motion, in which we say that the object is if the object is in a motion and it is not being, it is not being given any external disturbance, then it continues to be motion infinitely. That is the inertia of motion, right? In the same manner, rotating inertia means as soon as we start rotating it, the inertia takes kicks into place, and then it will be continuously rotating because of the inertia of rotation. Okay, so the flywheel stores the kinetic energy using this phenomena of inertia of rotation. Okay, so using this formula, the flywheel stores the energy. This energy can be converted from or to electrical from and to electricity with high efficiency. Why are we going for, why can we say that this inertia can be, sorry, this kinetic energy can be converted with high efficiency? Means because here we know there is no loss of energy actually. We will not find any loss of energy actually. So because of that, what happens is, whatever the amount of energy you are taking, that energy can be converted into electricity, or it can be converted from electricity with higher efficiency. Okay, let us see how this technology is being developed and what are the different parts which we need to know in order to understand this concept. All those things we'll see. Okay, the flywheel energy storage is an old concept which has now become commercially viable due to the advances made in high strength, lightweight fiber composite rotors and the magnetic bearings that operate at high speed. So actually, he's saying that actually the flywheel technology is an old concept, but it is now available for us commercially. Why is it available commercially right now, not before? Means because of various advances in the technologies. Here, because of the advances in the technologies, what happened is we have developed high strength, lightweight fiber composite rotors. So we are having high strength but low weight, high strength but low weight composites which can be used for our rotor making. Because of which, what happens is the rotor can go to higher speeds, right? If the material is of low strength, at higher speeds, the centrifugal force which is there will be dominating, and because of the dominating nature of the centrifugal force, what happens? The rotor will undergo a lot of mechanical stresses and strains, and because of that, the rotor may break, the rotor may damage itself. So we need to make sure that the rotor which we are using at higher speeds has high strength. So in order to overcome those centrifugal forces, in order to withstand those centrifugal forces and external stresses, the rotor should be having a very high strength. And that can be only happen in case okay, that high strength material. There are various high strength materials which we can use for the rotor production. Okay, so why are we again going for lightweight components? Means, as you know that if the strength of the material is getting higher, it may also make the rotor bulky, right? So because of which what happens is the inertia of starting, or the inertia, or the amount of energy required to move the rotor of higher weight will be a lot larger, right? So in order to overcome that also, we need to make sure that the rotor is of lightweight. So the rotor should be of high strength as well as lightweight. So in order to meet all these requirements, in the past we didn't have any material which is, checking all the check boxes, okay, which we can check the all check boxes. That's why we could not use the flywheel energy storage that efficiently in the past. So now, because of the advances made in various technologies and various areas, what is happening is, here we are having high strength and lightweight fiber composite rotors. They have developed high strength as well as lightweight fiber composite rotors. And because of this, we are able to use the flywheel technology for energy storage in the day-to-day lives. Okay. Now, here the round trip conversion efficiency of a large flywheel system can approach 90%, much higher than that of a battery. So what is it saying means, round trip conversion means from flywheel to electrical energy, and again from electrical energy to flywheel. Either way, that is either from flywheel to electricity, or from electricity to flywheel. That means one complete cycle of conversion. One complete cycle of conversion, the efficiency is up to 90%. That is really high, because when we come to the batteries, we know that the batteries have an efficiency of 85 to 90%, right? That is single way conversion. So single way conversion means only either from electricity to the chemical energy, or chemical energy to the electricity, not both ways. So first time we'll have 85%, and again when you try to convert it back, for example, if you're converting it into electrical into chemical, you will be having 85% of efficiency. And again, when you want to convert from battery to electricity, there also you will have 85%. So first 85% will be there, from 100% 85% will be converted. In that 85%, 85 units also, you will be having only 85% of that 85 units to to be converted back. So there will be a lot of loss of efficiency, lot of loss of energy will be lost. So here they are saying that the round trip efficiency itself is 90%. That means once you convert it from the flywheel to the electricity, and electricity to the flywheel, both the conversions together, is saying that it is 90%, which is much more greater than of a battery. The energy storage in a flywheel is limited by the mechanical stresses due to the centrifugal forces at high speeds. As I said in the past, when we have a rotatory thing, any rotating item, we know that there are two types of forces that are being stresses or developed in the rotating body. The first one is called as the centripetal force, and the second one is called as a centrifugal force, right? Centripetal force, what happens? The centripetal force tries to attract the body into the rotation, right? The centrifugal force tries to push the body away from the center. So this we know, right? So whenever you are going for a rotatory thing like kinetic energy and everything, there what happens is, we need to make sure that our flywheel or the item which we are taking, either rotor or anything, that can be, what do you say, that can withstand all those mechanical stresses which are due to centrifugal forces. So here, whenever we are going for such a mechanism, the main what is the main limiting point which we will be having is the mechanical strength of that particular material at higher speeds. That is our main limitation. Okay. Next, small to medium sized flywheels have been in use for years. As we know, this is an old technology, so small and medium flywheels have been used for many years. Only thing is, we did not have large sized flywheels because of this uh, concept of low strength and heavy weight composite rotors. So now we have, now the because of the advances, we have high strength and lightweight fiber composite rotors, because of which even the larger sized flywheels are available. Okay, so the present goals of the developments is to achieve 5 times the energy density of the currently available secondary batteries. So they have a goal, because of all these developments and everything, they are keeping a goal that we need to make a flywheel which is 5 times, which has a capacity of 5 times of the energy density of the secondary batteries. Whatever batteries we are having in the, even from that batteries, it he wants to, we want to make that our flywheel is such that it contains 5 times more energy than a secondary battery. That is the present goal for the developments, due to the developments. Now, the flywheel system is made of fiber epoxy composite rotor supported on magnetic bearings, rotating in a vacuum and mechanically coupled with an electrical machine that can work as a motor or a generator. He is just telling us what are the different components present in the flywheel system. The first thing he's saying is it is an epoxy fiber, sorry, fiber epoxy composite rotor. We have a rotor that is supported on magnetic bearings. Bearings are nothing but the you might have seen in your cycles or in fans or anything. You will be having small balls on which the total rotating system will be there in order to reduce the what do you say, friction. All right, in the same manner we also have bearings in case of flywheel. What are those, but here they have a different what do you say, property, which is nothing but the magnetic property. We have magnetic bearings. Okay, now, and this all system, the total system is rotating in a vacuum. Why are we going for a vacuum? Means again to reduce different external factors and everything. In vacuum you will, whatever the situation, whatever the type of energy or whatever the type of motion or anything is there, in vacuum you can find it at its highest efficiency, right? So in order to make sure that we are getting the highest efficiency, we are rotating all this thing in vacuum, and it is mechanically coupled with an electrical machine that can work as a motor or as a generator. So um, so you know that the from your I'm guessing that from your workshop you understand that a machine can be either be used as a generator or as a motor, right? The same mechanism, the same structure, whatever we are going to use can be used as a motor or as a generator based upon our requirement. So that is how, that is what he's saying. Here he is mechanically coupling the total mechanism of the flywheel with a machine, electrical machine that can work as a generator or as a motor whenever whichever is required. Okay, now the next thing is two counter rotating wheels are placed side by side where gyroscopic effects must be eliminated, such as in a city transit bus, train or an automobile. So wherever we need to eliminate this gyroscopic effects, we are going to place two counter rotating wheels. Two counter rotating wheels. That is, first, if one is rotating in the clockwise direction, the other will be rotating in the anti-clockwise direction. Okay. Okay. The energy stored in a flywheel having a moment of inertia J and the rotating at an angular speed omega is given by the following equation. That is, E is equals to half J omega square. This is a normal thing, right? We know that the kinetic energy which we usually, what is the equation, means half mv square, right? In the same manner, when we are going for a rotatory motion, then the m is replaced by the moment of inertia as well as the speed v square. There, that is a linear speed. Here we have an angular speed omega, so we are replacing that with omega square. The centrifugal force on the rotor material of density rho at a radius r is given by this equation, which is supported by the hoop stress in the rotor rim. So this is the centrifugal force, and this centrifugal force is again supported by hoop stress in the rotor. Hoop means circle, right? Hoop means a ring. In that there will be a ring in where the stress is developed, and this centrifugal force is again supported by that hoop stress. That is what he's saying. Here he's saying that the centrifugal force, what is the amount of centrifugal force which we will be experiencing means rho into r omega square. Okay, r is nothing but radius and rho is the density of the material. Again, omega is the angular speed at which the flywheel is being rotated. Now, because the linear velocity v is equals to 2 pi r omega, this is a formula. You people might have known this formula. V is equals to 2 pi r omega. Okay, the maximum centrifugal stress in the rotor is proportional to the square of the outer tip velocity. Okay, we know this is the linear velocity, right? That is the angular velocity, angular speed, and we have this linear velocity. From this linear velocity, what are we trying to understand is we are trying to understand that the centrifugal stress, which is due to the centrifugal force, will be proportional to the square of the outer tip velocity. Now, you people must understand that this will be a disk. I'll show you the disk also. Wait a second. Something like this, you will have a disk, two disks will be there. Okay, now if you just look at this diagram itself, you can understand that there is a ring, right? There is a ring. That ring will be having two of the radii, right? First radii will be your inner radii and the outer radii. Now because of this structure, what happens is the speed at which the element in the inner radius is rotating will be different from the speed at which the element in the outer ring area is rotating. The speeds will be different from inner to outer radii. Okay. So because of which what happens is the outer radii will be having, the outer radius will be having much more higher speed than the inner radius. That is why he is saying that whatever the centrifugal force, the maximum centrifugal force in the rotor is proportional to the square of the outer tip velocity. That means outer tip velocity, whatever the speed at which the outer tip is rotating, that will be your maximum amount of speed or velocity, and that square of that will be proportional to the maximum centrifugal force. That is what he is saying. Now, the allowable stress in the material places an upper limit on the rotor tip speed. Now you know that the centrifugal stress is proportional to the square of the outer tip velocity, right? Now because of this nature, we can assume we need the material to be intact, right? It should not break or it should not disintegrate. So in order to make sure that our what do you say, material does not disintegrate, we need to make sure what is the allowable amount of stress, right? That allowable amount of stress again depends upon the upper limit. Allowable amount of stress depends upon what does it depend upon means it depends upon the rotor tip speed. Again, we so that we should not we in order to make sure that our the rotor does not break itself due to the centrifugal forces, we should make sure that our outer tip speed which is there, that should be in a certain value, certain range. That is what he's saying. Therefore, a smaller rotor can run at higher speeds and vice versa. So, as the sorry, because of this, because of this nature, a smaller rotor can run at high speeds and vice versa. That means if you have a smaller rotor, it can run at high speed, and if you have a larger rotor, it will be run at low speeds. That is what he's saying. Now, the thin rim type rotor has a high inertia to weight ratio and stores more energy per kilogram weight. He's saying that thin rim type rotor will store more energy per kilogram weight. For this reason, the rotor in all practical flywheel system designs is a thin rim configuration. That is what he's saying, that the thin rim type will have higher density of storage of energy, so higher energy density. That means whatever we are using in the practical flywheel system design also, the whatever rotor we are using will be of thin rim configuration. Okay. For such a rotor with inner radius r1 and outer radius r2, it can be shown that the maximum energy that can be stored for an allowable rotor tip velocity of v is as follows. So, he is giving us a formula for the maximum energy that can be stored when the inner radius is r1 and the outer radius is r2 with an allowable rotor tip velocity v. So this is the formula. K1 is equals to Emax is equals to K1 v square into 1 plus r1 by r2 whole square, where K1 is a proportionality constant. We know that Emax will be proportional to v square, this we know, and based upon this only he is writing this equation. Now, the thin rim flywheel with ratio R1 by R2 ratio approaching unity results in a higher specific energy for a given allowable stress limit. He's just giving us different values, different understanding, and different nature of the things, man. Here, he's just saying that in a thin rim flywheel, if R1 by R2 ratio is equals to unity, that means R1 by R2 ratio equals to unity means, what does that mean? Those R1 and R2 will be almost equal. R1 R2 will be almost equal. If that happens, the high results in a high specific energy for an allowable stress limit. So it will be having high specific energy. The higher the ultimate strength of the material, the higher the specific energy. So as the strength of the material increases, the amount of the specific energy also increases. The lower the material density, the lower the centrifugal forces produced, which leads to a higher allowable speed and specific energy. So even if the material density is low, that means there will be less amounts of centrifugal forces produced, and because of which the speed at which the rotor can rotate will be increased, and because of the speed of the rotor is being increased, the specific energy of that rotor will be increased. That is what is saying. The maximum energy storage Emax therefore can be expressed as follows. In the previous case, we have expressed it in terms of R1 and R2. Now we are expressing this in a different form. Okay, Emax is equals to KT into sigma max by rho, where K2 is another proportionality constant, sigma max is the maximum allowable hoop stress. Hoop means, again ma, I'm saying ring, it's just a ring. Okay, hoop is nothing but the ring. Rho is the density of the rotor material. So this is the formula for the maximum energy storage. A good flywheel design therefore has a high sigma max by rho ratio for high specific energy. It also has high E by rho ratio for rigidity, where E is the Young's modulus of elasticity. Okay, ma, the thing is, he's just giving us different basic needs for the rotor design, like what should be high and what should be low, and what will be the situation, and what are those things. That is what he's giving us. Okay, so for high specific energy, we need to have high sigma max by rho ratio, as well as high. For rigidity, we need to have E by rho ratio as high. Okay, that is what is saying. Next is the metallic. The metallic flywheel has low specific energy because of low sigma max by rho ratio, whereas high strength polymer fibers such as graphite, silica, and boron have much higher sigma max by rho ratio. Store an order of magnitude higher than per unit weight. So what is he saying means, the metallic flywheel has. Okay, ma. How specific energy of material affects the energy storage capacity of flywheel. So here, what we are saying, what we are having is, here if you just look at this equation, ma'am, in the previous equation, here he is saying that Emax, whatever the Emax is there, that is dependent on this sigma max by rho. Sigma max by rho is again a value for which is high for a high specific energy. Sorry, you were asking about density, right? Sorry. Yeah, that's what. This will have a high specific energy is directly, this is higher for rho sigma max by rho ratio. If you have a higher sigma max by rho ratio, you are having higher specific value, right? Higher specific energy. And because of having the higher specific energy, again you're allowing the this, due to this formula you can see that the maximum storage capacity is also increasing. That is what is the relation. This is, as it is, the Emax is directly proportional to sigma max by rho, and that is again directly proportional to the high specific energy. We are having high, if you have a high specific energy, you can store high amounts of, what do you say, storage, right? You can store the high amounts of energy. That is what he's saying. That's all. If you have low specific energy, that means your what do you say, your capacity to store energy will also be less. Okay. Next, in addition to the high specific energy, the composite rotor has a safe mode of failure as it disintegrates into fluff rather than fragmenting like the flywheel. So here, what is saying is, because if you are using a composite fiber polymer, as sorry, composite epoxy, okay, fiber epoxy polymers as your material, what happens is, if they start to disintegrate, that will not become like, it will not break into pieces, it will be like a fluffy material, like all the fibers will be extracted from that, this one, and it will become a rather messy thing than breaking of the metal flywheel. Okay, so because of that, what we need to make sure is that we have a safe mode for failure. We need to make sure that there is some mechanism which will stop the flywheel as soon as it reaches its safe value. That is why, why are we having this means, this why are we doing this means, this is because of the disintegrating nature of the epoxy resins. Now, the fiber epoxy composite ring is made of two rings. The outer ring is made of high strength graphite and the inner ring of low cost fiber. Here, even before going into the this one, we have different specific energy storable, maximum specific energy storable in thin rim flywheel with various rim materials. He is just showing us what is the amount of energy that can be stored per 1 kg, or how many watt hours can be stored per 1 kg of different rotor wheel materials. You can see different rotor wheel materials here on your left hand side, and on your right hand side you can see what are the maximum specific energy storable. Now you can see from this situation that you can see that the polymer fiber composites are having 350 watt hour per kg, which is very high than what margin steel or aluminum alloy, right? So, and fuse the silica fiber composite has 1000 watt-hour per kg, which is very much higher. The specific energy storable is very much higher in case of a fused silica fiber composite. And here for just for our comparison, this one he has given us the lead acid battery as well as lithium ion battery also. You can see lithium ion battery and lead acid battery have very less specific energy storable, right? If you can see it, for the lead acid battery it's just 40 watt hour per kg, whereas for lithium ion battery it is up to 120 watt hour per kg, which is very less than what we can see in case of a composite fiber rotor wheels. Now, now what is he going to tell us is going to tell us what is how does this total mechanism work, what is how does this total structure is there, those things will be seen. The fiber epoxy composite rim is made of two rings. We have two rings. The outer ring is made of high strength graphite, the inner ring of low cost fiberglass. So this is how the rotor will be. This is one of the designs of the rotor. So in which you will be having two rings. The outer rim will be for strength, which is made of graphite, and again the inner ring will be made of glass. This is for you know getting maximum amount of energy storage. And we'll have the hub is nothing but the case in which we are going to put this uh, single pieces aluminum with radial flexibility to relieve the interface. Here this in whatever is there in this between, which is connecting all those things, that is the hub. That is what he's talking about. This is the total structure of the flywheel mechanism. The hub is made of single piece aluminum with in the radial spoke form. That is what we have seen. Such a construction is cost effective because it uses costly material only where it is needed for strength. That is the outer ring where the centrifugal force is high, resulting in a high hoop stress. That is what he's saying. Okay, here we are having, because of this two ring mechanism, we are seeing that we are using graphite only on the outer rim, that is for strength, and we are using glass in the inner rim such that we are reducing the cost of production of the total system. Okay, the complete flywheel energy storage system requires the following components. So he's just saying us what are the different components that are being okay that are being present. What are the different components of the flywheel energy storage system? What are the different components required? Means the first one is the high speed rotor attached to a shaft via a strong hub. Okay, we know that. Next, bearings with good lubrication system with magnetic suspension in high speed rotors. Here we need to make sure that whatever the bearings we are using are do not produce any frictional force. Those should have a good lubrication system such that there will be no frictional force present for the smooth operation of this rotor. Next is the electro mechanical energy converter, usually a machine that can work as a motor during charging, as a generator while discharging the energy. Here you need to understand that the rotor will be charged when it is rotating. So in order to rotate the rotor, it should act as a motor. That is what is the main issue. Okay, power electronics to drive the motor and to condition the generator power. This is nothing but in order to okay ma, there are different systems in there are different systems in general. One of the system is the power electronics drives. What this drives will have means it will have a power electronic system as well as a machine. So those two will be integrated together, which is called as a drive. This drive, what happens is, in this drive you can control the amount of electrical power that is given to the drive or as well as drawn from the drive. Okay, so in this total situation, in the if you are having a motor or a generator, what we are going to do is we are going to pair up that with an power electronics system, in order to make that a flexible way, to run the motor, to adjust whatever you need. That is, if you want the speed to be increased, if you want the amount of energy to be increased, all those things will be done in a secured and normal environment, rather than going into the mechanical parts and increasing the mechanical input physically. What we'll be doing is we'll be using electronics such that whatever is happening electronically. Okay. Next, control electronics for controlling the magnetic bearings and other functions. This is also one of the subjects which we will be studying, which is called as a control system. I think you will be studying in your second year, after this all circuits 1, after circuits 1 and circuits 2 and control systems will be in parallel. There you will see that in order to make everything easily controllable, make everything easily controllable and make everything such that we may control it as we need it. Like if you want the speed to increase, you can just turn a hub, or you can just on a switch. That's all. Because of just owning the switch, or because of just turning a hub, what happens is it will make sure that whatever the control system is there, it will make sure that our action is being translated into a mechanical action. Okay, our whatever the instruction we are giving will be translated into mechanical action, and all these phenomena which we are doing will be summed up as a control system, which will be summed up as a control system. You will see it in detail while you study your total 4 years of engineering. But now, just understand that control electronics is just like for controlling whatever you want. Like if you simple example is, that we have integrated this one, right? You can on your AC from anywhere, right? You people might be seeing some ads like that. Right. So how are we doing that? Means we have a control system which can be operated from anywhere. In order to make sure that our system is also working in a proper manner, we'll be having a control mechanism which can be used to modulate or manipulate its values. That is the fifth part: control electronics for controlling the magnetic bearings and other functions. So here, this diagram shows us the different parts of a flywheel technology. Okay, so on the right side, which you are seeing, is a rudimentary uh, understanding of the flywheel technology. On the left side, which you are seeing, is the practical flywheel technology, and different parts, how they are being put together, and all those things we are seeing here. Okay. So, next is the superconducting magnet. Okay, the superconducting technology. Okay, we'll see what is a superconducting this one magnet. Okay, before even going into this, I don't think you people have completed your magnetic circuits, right? Is it over? Magnetic circuits is over. Magnetic circuits is not over, or is it over? Just message me something. Okay, even if it is not over, we can't do anything right now. So let's continue. So there is a technology called as the superconductor technology, which is also again used for storing energy. This technique is, it can be stored, it can store any type of energy as usual. It can be stored, we can store the thermal energy, or we can store the PV energy, we can store the wind energy, whatever the type of energy you want, you can store it. Okay. Now, how is this done? How is this superconductor technology and what is the superconductor? All these things we'll see. In its working principle, the energy is stored in the magnetic field of a coil and is given by the following expression. We know that in a inductor there will be energy stored. You know that there are three types of basic materials, the basic elements, right, which are nothing but the resistance, conductance as well as inductance, right. In case of each of these, they have different properties. Resistance does not store any type of energy, it will just dissipate the energy, that also we know. And again, while coming to the inductor or conductor, there you can see that inductance can store energy as well as the conductor can store sorry, capacitor can store energy, and these two, inductor as well as capacitor, will be storing energies in different forms. All right, while coming to the inductor, you can see that the energy will be stored in the form of magnetic field, right. And in case of a capacitor, you can see that it will be stored in the electric field itself. How means the capacitor will be having two plates, and the two plates will be charged in opposite response, right. That one plate will be positive, the other plate will be negative, and there will be a insulating material between those two plates, and you can store the energy in a capacitor. While coming to the inductor, whatever the amount of energy which we are storing is in the form of a magnetic field. You know that when a current carrying conductor is placed, you will magnetic field, sorry, a magnetic field is produced around that current carrying conductor, and that is the main what is the principle in which the inductor will be storing its energy. That is what he's saying. Okay, now what is the energy expression for the energy stored in a current carrying conductor? That is what we are seeing. Energy stored in a in a coil carrying current I is given by the following equation. E is equals to half Li square. We know that. Or E is equals to half B square by mu, where B is the magnetic field density of the coil in Tesla, mu is the magnetic permeability of air, 4 pi into 10 power minus 7 Henry per meter. L is the inductance of the coil. So, is showing us two different ways of the same equation. The first way is using the magnetic properties of the material. The second is using the normal electrical properties of the material. So, here we can see that B and mu, I think you people might have heard about this. If you didn't, even then it's okay. If, you will be studying them in your future classes and everything. That is when you go for the magnetic circuits. In the first chapter, you have a, I think you might have a half topic as magnetic circuits. In that magnetic circuits, you will learn what is what and what are the different definitions and what are different units and everything that you will see. Okay, so this is the formula. Half for our convenience, let's go for half Li square. That is more convenient for us and more real for us. Okay, so energy stored is given by half Li square. Now, the coil must carry current to produce the required magnetic field. We know that, right? The coil should be carrying current. Now, in order to carry the current, it should be having some voltage difference between the coil terminals. That is what it's saying. The current requires a voltage to be applied to the coil terminals. And now you know that let us say that both of them are there. There is a voltage difference and the and the coil is carrying a current. Because of the current, you are having a magnetic field around the coil. All this have been satisfied. Let us say. Now, the relation between the coil current and the voltage is given as V is equals to Ri plus L into di by dt. You know this, right? R is the resistance of the coil, and L is the inductance of the coil, and di by dt is nothing but the change in the current in the coil. This we know that. So, for storing energy in a steady state, the second term in the equation must be 0. So, in order to store the energy in steady state, there should not be any change in the current. Di by dt will be 0. That di by, in order to make, if you make di by dt as 0, then the voltage required to circulate the needed current will be simply V is equals to Ri. So you will be having only V is equals to Ra. The resistance of the coil is temperature dependent. The resistance of the coil is temperature dependent. For most conducting coils, it is higher at higher temperatures. As the temperature increases, the resistance also increases. In certain materials, the resistance abruptly drops to a precise zero at some critical temperature. How is this happening? Let us see. In this diagram, you can see as the temperature is going on increasing, the resistance is also going on increasing proportionally. But when you see it in the reverse direction, you can see that as the temperature is decreasing, the resistance is also decreasing. And as the temperature is decreasing to a point Tc, which is called as a critical temperature, the resistance drops to zero. The resistance drops itself to a zero. That means you will not have any resistance at all in the coil. Okay, in the figure, in certain materials, the resistance abruptly drops to a precise zero at some critical temperature. In the figure, the point is shown. The point is shown as Tc. Okay, below this temperature, no voltage is required to circulate the current in the coil, and the coil terminals can be shorted. So he is saying that below this critical temperature, no voltage is required to circulate the current in the coil, and the coil terminals can be shorted. Why is he saying that? Means because there is no resistance, we need not to push the current from one point to another point. Okay, so if you are not needed to push the current from one point to another point, so there is no requirement of voltage, right? That is what is saying. The current continues to flow in the shorted coil indefinitely, with the corresponding energy also stored indefinitely in the coil. So because of this nature of this material, where the resistance is becoming zero, we need not to have any voltage to drive the current from one point to another point. So the current in the coil itself flows indefinitely. Because of the continuous flowing of this current, the magnetic field of the current will also the magnetic field produced by the coil will also be continuously present. It will be stored continuously. That is what he is saying. The coil is said to have attained the superconducting state, one that has zero resistance. So when this happens, then the coil is said to be in superconducting state, where there is zero resistance. The energy in the coil then freezes. The energy in the coil then freezes. Freezes in the sense it is constant. It cannot be changed. That is what he means. So in this way, in this total scenario, in this total way, we are making sure whatever the energy that is present in the coil is present indefinitely. Okay. Now, if you see on your right side, you can see the superconducting energy storage schematic. That means the total system, the total the connections which we need to have in order to get the superconducting energy storage. That is what is being shown. If you can see here, you can see that there is a computer. That computer is giving us some control over all the different things, that is on an inverter, on a superconducting material, as well as the voltage regulators, which all whatever the items which we are going to use, whatever the electronic or electrical items which we are going to use in this superconducting energy storage, those are all will be controlled by a computer. How do they do that and everything, that you will understand when you study all the 4 years of your engineering. Okay, but the time being, understand that everything will be controlled by a system. Okay. Next, in the left hand side, you can see the different parts of the superconducting magnet itself. What are the different parts, and how these different parts are being present, and what are the different currents, and what are the different things that are being present. All those things you can see here. And this whole thing is present in vacuum. Again, why are we putting this in vacuum means in order to make sure that there is no friction and everything, there is no issues which will be what do you say, disturbing our current. So this is the structure of the superconducting magnet. Now, why are we going for this superconducting energy storage system? What are the different advantages over the other technologies that we'll see? So here, the round trip efficiency of the charge discharge cycle is high high at 95%. This is higher than attainable by any other technology. This is literally insane, right? 95% of roundabout efficiency, which is very much higher. That this is higher than the flywheel technology. Flywheel itself is the highest efficiency which we have seen till now. That has 90% of the roundabout efficiency, round trip efficiency. Now in the superconducting energy storage, we can see that this is 95%, which is much more higher than the all other technologies. Now, it has much longer life, up to 30 years. So once you store this superconducting energy and everything, once you install that, you can use it for 30 years. That is nice, right? The charge and discharge times can be extremely short, making it attractive for supplying large power for a short period of time. So this charging and discharging can be done very quickly. Very quickly it can be charged, as well as very quickly it can be discharged. If let us say there is a sudden peak in our load, if there is a sudden surge in the load, that means you need a large amount of current suddenly, then if you are using a superconducting energy storage, then it is easier for us to give that amount of energy in a short period of time. That is what he's saying. It has no moving parts in the main system except in the cryogenic refrigeration components. So here, why are we going for this cryogenic refrigeration components? Means in order to maintain the temperature that is required for the coil. Okay, you know that there is a critical temperature, and only below the critical temperature does the material go into the superconducting state. So in order to make sure that our material goes into the superconducting state, we need to make sure that the ambient temperature which is there, that is very less than the critical temperature. So to in order to maintain all these things, we need a cryogenic refrigeration components. In the cryogenic refrigeration components, we may have some of the moving parts. We may have some of the moving parts. Apart from that, whatever the technology, whatever the issues you are seeing here, like for example, transformer or inverter, or that electronic isolation switch, or superconducting magnet, or voltage regulation switch, all these things, whatever you are going to see, all those do not have any moving parts. Those are all static in nature. Okay, so we do not have any moving parts, which makes the system more reliable than the other types of this one. So okay, these are the different advantages of the superconducting energy storage upon other technologies. Now, in the superconducting energy storage system, a major cost is to keep the coil below the critical superconducting nature temperature. That is the main issue which we need to make sure. The main issue which we need to make sure means is nothing but the coil should be having temperatures that should be placed in the temperature less than its critical temperature. So that is the main issue, and because of that main issue itself, the maximum cost which we are going to what do you say, invest on this will be on the refrigeration components only. Okay, now until now the niobium titanium alloy has been extensively used, which has a critical temperature of about 9 degree Kelvin. This requires liquid helium as a coolant at around 4 degree Kelvin. Just imagine 9 degree Kelvin and 4 degree Kelvin are the temperatures which we are talking. That means how cool should be the superconducting material in order to make sure that it doesn't lose its superconducting nature. So to make sure that we are providing these low temperatures, this low extremely low temperatures, we need to make sure that our cryogenic refrigeration components are working effectively. So just by understanding this 9 degrees Kelvin and 4 degrees Kelvin itself, you can see that the main components, the main cost, major cost which will be going is going for the temperature maintenance of the superconducting materials. So these are the two topics which for today's class, and we have one more topic on the types of energy storage itself, that is the compressed air technology. Actually, this is the compressed air technology. I'll Let's discuss this in the next class so that it will be neat, and I can give you the more information about that. So that's it for today's class.